Drilling fluids touch just about everything in the drilling process. We're here to deconstruct the drilling process and drilling fluid concepts to provide a deeper understanding of our industry. In each episode, we'll share information, talk to interesting people, and maybe share a few stories along the way. Welcome to the Flowline, a production of AES Drilling Fluids, brought to you by Matt Offenbacher and Justin Gauthier.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another amazing episode of the Flowline. Matt and I always have some fun, interesting conversations around drilling fluids topics. Matt, how are you doing today, buddy? Monday, kicking things off in a bang, huh?
Man, I'm I would say it's another Monday. It's been, I don't know, I feel like coming into Monday, like there's all these meetings and everything where you're like kind of get through Monday,
Yep.
and we don't have meetings like at my previous employer. We're just getting caught up on things, and then the rest of the week is pretty free. But I'm like, okay, what are we going to tackle? You know?
Well, we're always blocking and tackling.
Ooh,
fine
if you
words
will.
by Mr. Gary Langford likes to reference that a lot. And we actually have stickers,
Yeah,
blocking and
well,
tackling.
where have you put your stickers?
Laptop and the Yeti mug.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about it, though. My son wasn't too fond of them. I thought he might like them. He was like, "Are these football stickers?" And I was like, kind of, sort of, but it's more about the fundamentals. And I started going down a rabbit hole, and he's sick,
He's like,
so he was
enough
like,
of the lecture, Dad.
yeah.
Yeah, I see that.
But anyway, what before we get into drilling fluids, Matt, I mean, give us a brief update on the Astros. I feel like we haven't touched on that in a minute.
So at the time of this recording, we are at the All-Star break, and it couldn't have come fast enough because, man, do they look exhausted. So leading the division by about 5 games, they went on a bit of a tear, and then they had a losing streak and didn't do so hot here at home. But we have it seems like anybody who like touches a piece of paper, ends up on the injured list. Jake Myers got injured. Well, he was pulled out of the game before the game started, walking out to his position in center field.
What?
With a calf injury. And it was tight on him earlier. It just seems like no matter which way you turn, someone is hurt. So, probably the All-Star break is kind of, not, about a week of no games going on other than the All-Star game. But the other thing is, the draft just happened. So the Astros picked up some players who, may not play for years, if ever, but like they're going to go into the developmental programs. And then the other big question is, I remember the exact date, but like the trade deadline, where if they're going to make a move to get a little better before, making a run at the playoffs, like there's a lot of speculation as to what they're going to do. Are they going to get a left-handed bat? Are they going to get another starting pitcher because so many are hurt? But then our other starting pitchers who have been hurt are coming back. So if they're ready to go, Christian Javier is throwing 95.
Eesh.
I think his elbow seems to have healed.
Good.
Luis Garcia is doing some work, and Spencer Arrighetti, or as we call him, Spaghetti. He's he broke his thumb early in the season. Just got hit by a ball, like
Oh yeah, I remember hearing about that.
in the outfield, like before the game started. Broke his thumb or whatever. So he's making his way back. So, and Yordan Alvarez, we're still waiting.
Really? His
yeah.
hand's still messed up?
Mm-hmm.
Jeez.
So
Maybe he'll come back in time for playoffs and just crush.
that would be super. So there's a lot of people you haven't heard of from our minor league system who are playing right now.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, like
We're
the
still
infield.
5 games ahead?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is like Zach Short has like he had this amazing at bat against the Dodgers. He hit the walk-off hit the other night against the Rangers.
Nice.
But it is really like and he's taking over for a guy from the minor leagues we called up who got hurt. Like it's just one of these like
So backup of the backup.
yes. So anyways,
They must be like cheating a lot then.
yeah, I mean that's the only way, right? I think
Is that still a thing for the Astros, or is that kind of like water under the
people
bridge
bring it
now?
up, but like it's the people who are like, really sour grapes kind of thing. But
Good. Well, I'm glad we got the recap, All-Star break, and hopefully we can finish the second half of the season strong. Anyway, moving on to drilling fluids topics. Matt, we've got another series. I would say it's a series, but oftentimes there's things that we just like to clear the air. And it's one of those where oftentimes if you're going through some operational things, and next thing you know, you've got samples going in all kinds of different directions, people looking at them. But I think it'd be good to kind of cover, third party lab mud checks, and what the purpose of a third party lab is, and maybe just some considerations, and why sometimes you may get frustrated when this type of stuff happens. That mud gets put in different places where oftentimes there needs to be better discussion before and perhaps even after our mud gets sent to different labs. What do you think? Is that something that's important to you?
Oh, it's rubbing a bit of salt on a very new wound.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, there's a little backstory to this, and we deal with third party labs all the time, and uh, unfortunately, we see a whole swath of quality of data, knowledge, that sort of thing, and we would love to be able to have an outside party that we could say, look, take a look at this, and they could confidently and competently match our results within what you would expect is some sort of statistical expectation. You think that's not a huge ask. However, we find a number of times that labs that say, "Hey, I can do a mud check for you," might not actually, like, they have the equipment, but they haven't done it in a while. The equipment's not calibrated, or just basic things sort of create these unnecessary conflicts when the goal is to reconcile something or get an answer for a customer. Um, and it's one of those, we've even wanted to pay third parties, and they charge a lot of money for things like a mud check, just so we have an outside source to come by.
Yeah.
But when we have, we've just been so disappointed with the way things are done. And look, I'm sure there are some fine ones out there. I would love to find, like, reach out if you think you're good at this.
Yeah.
I'd love to be able to work with you. But we're running into, at this point, it's classic. Directional company has a tool failure. They pull a sample from somewhere, and then it's a gotcha. Your low gravs are high. And it's like, okay, well, why don't we actually look at the mud check that was run? And
Yeah.
oh, this isn't the same.
Right.
So just making sure that we're being honest with each other. I'd like to think I understand that, what is trust but verify,
Yes.
but at the same time, there's an aspect of this where, like, you're sort of guilty until proven innocent. You're sort of treated like a bad actor until you're not. And there may be some bad actors out there, but there's some good actors, and I think they should be sort of given the benefit of the doubt
Yeah.
to make sense of these things.
No, that's true. And I mean, at the end of the day, is like typically, if you're having problems on a rig, and the most fundamental thing you can do is just get a good mud check. And
Yeah.
you would think that if we grabbed mud from the same spot at the same time, same sample area, that the mud check should be pretty much the same, right? Assuming, your equipment's calibrated, all this and that. But sometimes that's not the case, is it?
No, and I mean, what's weird is we see it all the time, and, like, our guys, okay, so, like, if you're one of our field people, your field suit probably comes by and runs a mud check right behind you to make sure, hey, everything looks good, your equipment's in working order. But then they also take samples and send them to our lab. And guess what? Our lab people have no idea who you are if you're a mud engineer, right? Like, they're
Yeah.
just doing a mud check. So if there was some huge discrepancy there, like, they would be at, butting heads all the time. We don't see that.
Mhm.
And then even, like, mud that's mixed at the plant, and they do a report, and then it gets sent out to the rig, and, like, yeah, they look pretty similar.
Yeah.
So there's the element of just getting the numbers to match, and then I guess there's we want the lab to be able to act as a referee. But in this case, in this one case, there's one outfit. We're not going to name names. You can figure it out. But our big frustration is they're starting to make recommendations on the mud that are highly speculative, not citing industry standards or literature, and sort of, I think, try and put one party in a bad light.
Mhm.
in order to sort of look, this is purely, I don't know why, but it could be, hey, you need us to keep checking these guys because they're not doing a good job.
Which keeps them in
Um,
business.
right, like there's a motivation there, and um, I understand wanting to be helpful and constructive, but this doesn't really feel constructive. When we've had issues with a solids control company, there have been a few who are like, "Oh, I sent a mud report out and gotcha," you know? But the guys we've worked with, were said, "Hey, look, how about this? What if we just figure out what's wrong and help the customer? Instead of doing the gotcha and creating all this drama, and then we look into the numbers and it turns out the mud report's fine and it actually matches what we were reporting or close enough." We say, "Oh, actually, this equipment is having some issues. Well, why don't we fix that?" Or, "Oh, I got you. No, you pulled a sample from the sand trap." Um, like, it's just, I mean, I understand holding people accountable, and we welcome that because I don't think we have anything to hide.
Yeah.
I mean, we've taken our lumps when we needed to, and we're not perfect. Um, but what really frustrates me is sort of the insinuation of, "Hey, I ran this mud check and this yield point, it could create some hole cleaning issues."
Mm.
It's like, okay, well, did you run hydraulics or are you just like, at what point has yield point been an absolute indicator of hole cleaning? Because
Yeah.
I can drill a well with water a lot of times, you know? Um, so just those kinds of things that when they get in front of a customer, the customer says, "Oh my gosh, look at all these problems we're having." And it's like, well, actually, no, we're not.
Yeah.
But we've got to go point by point and refute some of these things. And so this particular lab has and we got what, 3 reports over the weekend, and they were all in the same manner of sort of, well, this could be really problematic, and they looked fine. Like, and in fact, our lab back checked them, and they looked fine. But sort of the so um, I just took a bunch of the things I was seeing and an attempt to clear the record, because this is frustrating. You don't have to put other people down to bring yourself up. All you have to do is be reliable, and we want to do business with you. Like, we would be recommending our customers use you.
Right.
Um, and instead, there's just a lot of sort of um, things that could be true, but aren't in this case or don't apply in this case. Sort of create angst when, like, it doesn't get to the bottom of the problem.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Well, so I'd be curious to kind of go down the list. I mean, would you be open to going down and looking at the different properties, perhaps using this case as examples as to like, maybe what was reported and kind of how to like look at it differently?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm gonna try and be diplomatic here. I'm frustrated, and I think people can sense that, but um, I hope I hold myself to a standard of being professional and respectful, and I'm open to correction. But I want to bring these things up just because, I hope that we can share what sort of the right way to do these things is, or what we believe it is. And frankly, that I think that the industry should look for when we have these conversations, because people miss it. Like, how many people talk about what is the 6 RPM reading we should have, right? Like, K&M teaches it, all these things, but like at the end of the day, there's no ideal range. Like, you can make it too thick and increase your ECD, but like, we know what we can drill with.
Yeah.
From a hole cleaning principle, yeah, I can drill with water. But we've talked about it in the past. Hole cleaning is a function of pipe movement. It's a function of flow rate.
Hmm.
Viscosity can be too thick and actually deprive you of turbulence. So, like, yes, too thin in certain wells from a suspension perspective. But when you start talking about hole cleaning, when all you've seen is a mud check, you didn't run hydraulics and you don't know.
Yeah.
And while many of these wells can be similar, um, I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
Um, and so kind of moving into, and notice that almost every property has some problem with it, could be a problem. So, said, oh, the gel strengths are low. Well, okay, they're not progressive, but I mean, in one of these cases, it was 6-inch hole. So, I mean, they were pretty normal. They were actually well within the mud program, which you also don't have. So, we drill thousands of these wells. You run mud checks. I think that if our mud check matches what we programmed and what we say is in line with what we recommend, saying something like that is maybe out of line.
Yeah.
One of the reports brought up sag, and we've talked about this a number of times. Oh, the low shear rate viscosity is low. It could cause sag. Well, look, sag is much more a function, and there's tons of industry literature out there. Sag, one, is an oil-filled boogeyman. It causes people to panic as soon as they hear about it. Two, most sag incidents have something to do with low shear rate viscosity, but overwhelmingly have to do with drilling activity, like low circulation rates, slow pipe movement, your hole angle, other things which aren't on a mud check.
Right.
And then just FYI, company, you reported all your dial readings in centipoise. The proper unit set is degrees VG or degrees viscometer. The plastic viscosity is reported in centipoids, but you calculated it wrong. But in doing that, you said the PV is high, and that's a sign of fine solids loading. Well, it doesn't have to be fine solids. It can be a lot of solids. It can be water droplets in oil-based mud. But the PV wasn't necessarily high. It depends on the mud weight. It depends on the mud program, which it was well within spec. And so, the big thing about plastic viscosity is circulating pressures, which we've talked about in the past. It's the slope of that line. So at very high, if you got a viscosity shear rate versus shear stress, that line, if it's got a higher slope, it means the higher our pump, the higher the viscosity will be at those high shear rates. And that's going to lead to higher ECDs.
Yeah.
Which I don't want, which is why I want to, most of the time people put as low as possible. But recognizing a normal range for a fluid like this was fine.
Well, it's interesting when claimed that the PV was high, relative to what? Like that would be the thing that I'd be like.
I mean, even you say, oh, high for this mud weight or what have you, it's just one of these, you don't know what you're doing. We drilled on purpose with a plastic viscosity of 60 because we're using a specialized fluid.
Yeah.
It is high relative to fluids of that mud weight, but I also was drilling with like a 40-60 oil water ratio, so it was exactly what I expected.
Yes. Right. Context matters.
Yes.
You can't take just the values at face value and then apply some, again, what's wrong or right about, given mud. But anyway, moving on.
Yeah. And then, so we get into, they calculated the N factor, which is, power law fluids. They said, well, it's a sign of ultrafine solids. I beg to differ on the definition of ultrafine solids, but this fluid had a D50 of like 12 or 14 or something, which is fine. So they're not there. But it said the N factor was high and that it showed shear thinning. Well, it was close to 1. An N factor of 1 in a power law is a Newtonian fluid. So it doesn't make any sense. But the problem is nobody talks about the N factor as a sign of fluid issues. Like, this isn't common industry conversation when we're talking about mud quality. And this ultimately leads to more difficult conversations with customers because I got to explain power law, parameters when we're trying to talk about what happened in their operation. Like, I want to solve the problem. They also cite friction factor, which I'm not really sure what this is. I don't know if it's coefficient of friction. They said it was high, which meant it was a sign of, fine solids again or something. But it was 0.08. If it's coefficient of friction and it's 0.08, that's actually awesome for oil-based mud. I don't know. If it's something else, I welcome the education, but it may be some other instrument I'm not familiar with. With a crappy lubricity meter, we normally see like 0.17 with oil-based mud, but oil-based mud is a mess to measure these things with. So, once again, if it's a sign of fines, just show the PSD.
Yeah.
And then the PSD is actually listed in, we run thousands of these things. We have 3 labs that run these things constantly. And it was a very normal particle size distribution.
So they ran one?
They ran one.
Okay. And they were claiming
And they were claiming that, oh, it's, D50 of 12 or below, like that, that's a huge problem, and that's sort of accumulation of ultrafines. And it's like, no, it's not. In the Northeast, they would kill for the last well in their pad to have a D50 at 12. They would be high-fiving each other. Like, that's just, at those mud weights, it's very common just because of barite and sort of the equilibrium you reach with the screens you run
Yeah.
and the solids you generate. A D50 of 10 to 12 is obscenely normal. And then, they mentioned something about, we actually focus, I will add just for listener education, we look at the abundance of 6 micron or less and 2 micron or less. Because
Yep.
we find when you get that low, you are directly affecting fluid loss, filtration properties. Like that's when it affects drilling properties more directly with respect to performance. That's when we start kicking and screaming. But a D50 of 12 is nothing. Nothing to get people alarmed about. And then, they start going on about the distribution curve width and then the kurtosis and skewness. This is basically the shape of that curve.
Yeah.
Um, this isn't something. So yes, it comes on your output, but those things shift around all the time. When did you add barite last? How are you drilling? Those kinds of things. I would never cite kurtosis or skewness. Like the only reason that we would do that is when we're doing things in the lab, like clean studies
Yeah.
on how we can affect particle size distribution through LCM additions or other things. We're looking at the way the curve is shifting. But when you start introducing these things, it makes customers think there's a problem when there isn't. And you're not paid to create confusion.
Right.
And then, so the last part is, is just solids in general. So, they talk about quartz being abrasive. That is true, but they have some high-risk mud is where there's more than 15% LGS, 10% quartz, and 30% solids. Well, solids are a component of heavy mud. From a flow property perspective, 30% solids, I mean, that's not uncommon with heavy muds, but quartz content, yes, matters because it's a more abrasive particle than a lot of the others. But getting into this like bird's nest of solids relationships and saying this is industry criteria without citing literature, because nobody I know has heard of this parameter. And I'd like to think I know a lot of people, but I talked to one of our colleagues who has even more experience than you and me combined,
Yep.
and he just laughed looking at this. He said, "This is nonsense."
Hmm.
Abrasive properties, I'm going to go ahead and assume this involved a tool failure. Just when we're talking about, there's so much writing about abrasion, but abrasion is a function of a lot of different things. If you have abrasive hard particles, yes, right? It's a function of how fast they're moving, how big they are, how many there are of them. But the other part of it is what their neighbors are, right? Because if you have a bunch of other weight material around it that's relatively soft, it limits those impacts. And so my big question here is, okay, this seems like we're looking for a reason something happened, and we're sort of like backing our way out of that. Like, I've decided it's this, let's start backing our way out. But, this just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And similarly, there's a lot of insinuation about barite. Look, the barite world is a mess, right? So we know there's a lot of people who sell barite that has stuff in it that shouldn't be there. Specifically heavy metals that I don't think our customers would want in their material.
Right.
There's an obscene amount of pressure to get the lowest price possible. But, basically pure barite has a specific gravity about 4 or 5. Everything else in barite, when you're buying 4-1 barite, is something else. It could be quartz. It could be celestite. Whatever it is, it's a lower specific gravity. That's why the net is lighter.
Yeah.
Some of our customers want 395 barite because it's cheaper and they can get away with it. Some of our customers want 4-1. Some of our customers, sometimes we'll even source 4-2. It's expensive. But all that being said, there seems to be this desire to sort of report everything that isn't barite as a low gravity solid. And so customers look and they're like, oh, 25% low gravity solids, and they panic. And it's like, no, you're counting what would be barite components. And yeah, they're like formation solids, but they've been there the whole time. So if I'm reporting per my API mud check 10% low gravs, and then you put somewhere that there's 20% low gravs, well, those are barite constituents.
Yeah.
And well, yes, they exist and they're there. Every mud check has reflected this since the beginning of time. So this is somewhat misleading, although I understand they have an instrument. We have one. It's called an XRF. And they're pretty cool because what they can do is they can pick up elements, so they can quantify elements. But if you can quantify the barium, which isn't that common in barium sulfate, you should be able to back out the amount of just pure barite that should be present by volume.
Right.
That being said, it's a useful tool. We run it all the time. We've actually published papers on this barite constituency thing.
Mm-hmm.
Those little handheld ones are like 4 watts. They have some limitations to what they can detect. Ours we use in our lab is a 3,000 watt. It can do a lot. We have a PhD analytical chemist who can run it and has trained all our people. But depending on the level of detail and the power of the unit, it requires a fair amount of like calibration curves and everything to get confidence in what those constituents are. I don't know, like I don't even know what if any of that work has been done or if they're just taking a direct reading off of the unit. But most of those little handheld ones are generally used for like mining, or construction, right? So I have a piece of ore and I stick it on there. Or if you steal catalytic converters, you can see the palladium and stuff in it, right? You can or platinum, I'm sorry. But like any kind of metal, you could say, okay, there's, this much, nickel in it or what have you. So they're somewhat handy, but adapting them to oil field use requires some caution.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that wasn't done. I'm just saying based upon all the other commentary, I think more caution needs to be used everywhere. And look, there's plenty of literature out there that's people have been trying this with XRF for 30 years. It's not new. There's different powers and capabilities. Eventually you got to get radiation badged, because of how powerful these units can be, and they're shooting off X-rays. But, all that being said, make the API input for your API solids analysis should be obscenely obvious relative to everything else you're doing so that people don't get confused. And the biggest discrepancy that we see is people panic and they say our low gravs are way different, whether good or bad. And then we go look and we say, okay, what did you put in for your barite specific gravity? What did you put in for your base oil specific gravity? Because it is all, out of mass balance that you figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
So make those inputs very clear so that we can compare and see if our measurements match.
Yeah.
Even though our assumptions or so-called measurements of those other components is lined up, because most of these have shown different low gravity solids, and it turns out the measurements were actually pretty darn close, but it created all this confusion that was pretty quickly reconciled. Anyways, I think the solids analysis could use some work. But my biggest frustration with the overall sort of it sort of insinuates things that could be true, which would indicate a ton of negligence. If half of them were true, then you've got some real problems on your well, and that's the part that creates a lot of headaches and a lot of frustration.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's obvious why folks would send this, but like, why? Well, what would you say is the goal for sending, like, say, if there's tool failures or something like that, besides having someone besides us check our own mud? I mean, do you think there's a valid space for that?
I mean, absolutely. Like, I don't mind a third party checking, right? What I mind is the drama when it turns out numbers don't match exactly, and it turns out it was somebody either did something wrong, put in the wrong mud weight in their calculation.
Right.
I mean, I think we actually tried this in a study. It cost us like $1,200 to get a third-party mud check. They had the wrong mud weight. It was like a 9-pound mud, and they put in 12, and then reported back that we had like 18% low grafts or something. And it was just one of these like 9 pounds versus 12. Like, what happened?
Yeah.
You know? I think even worse because I think we sent them our mud check, which we shouldn't have done. We like didn't mean to. We wanted to be blind, but they actually could have referenced back and said like, "Oh, is this way off or not?" But
So with that said, then what would you say? And maybe again to help the industry, if companies are going to try to be constructive and help support said customers' operations, what are some good pointers that you would like to suggest?
I mean, I think one, look at the body of history around everything. So, a bunch of the language in some of these reports was we were on the precipice of failing every single well we're on, in a span of 3 days in like multiple regions. And it's just one of these like, okay, we're not on the precipice, okay, but you're certainly insinuating that we were negligent. If you really feel that way, I hope you care enough about your customer to bring us into the conversation.
Right.
But that's not how we got these reports. We said it was, you have some explaining to do. So that's point one. Use industry standards and cite public literature. So I know that like the API is slow to adopt things. I know that there's other places where, we sort of come up with rules of thumb. But if it is not mentioned anywhere but in your report as something that is a rule of thumb, that's a problem. Like, cite public literature that uses data that validates that argument. And a lot of times what I find is even when these rules of thumb are cited, you look at the paper, you look at the patent, or you look at whatever, which I will read into, by the way, and it's out of context. And because it was done 30 years ago in a vertical well and blah, 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 like, and it's like, these are just very different things. And maybe it merits, if we want to move the industry forward, a study that is in our current context. And we'd be open to working with you on that. But right now, like, we don't have that. The other stuff is stuff we've talked about, a lot, where just getting a sample at the same time with the mud company from the same place, right? Like, hey, we're going to do a check. I'm telling you about it. Like, look, if you pull a sample, there's nothing I can do about it, right? Like, if the customer asks, it's their mud. So let's go pull one at the same time. I'll go check. You check your people. What ticks me off about a lot of this stuff is, like, these are really good mud engineers out there on the rig working their tails off. And they feel like they're being thrown under the bus, right? Because like they're doing everything right. And then a report like this comes out and suggests that they have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah.
But if we're really out to solve problems, look, if it shows some form of negligence and that's like abundantly clear, that does need to get in front of the customer. I mean, even if it makes AES Drilling Fluids or Mud Company X look bad, we need to take those lumps and get better. Like, that's not the argument I'm making. I'm not saying let's hide this. My point is, if you really think that there are some serious issues that could be corrected with a drilling fluid because you are claiming this level of expertise, get with us. Let's fix it. Right? Like, let's all get better.
Yeah.
But that's not, I mean, I had a quote from one of our account managers and basically said, look, it's actually incredible that something like this can be produced, paid for, and sent to an operator. I mean, it's just, it's not fair. I mean, if the goal is helping our customers do better,
Right.
then creating this kind of noise isn't how we get there.
Right.
And so I'm just kind of frustrated, disappointed. We've had respectful conversations with third-party labs, and sometimes it's, shoot, let me educate you on how this equipment is. We had a third-party lab that was testing lubricants, and they were shearing them at like 12,000 RPM, and they were like, oh, we had to fail your lubricant. We're like, we've drilled 1,000 wells with this. Like, I can show you. And they were like, oh, well, and it was like, you can't use that mixer. Like, that's not how. It was like, so you've been rejecting all these other people's lubricants for this trial? based off of something you came up with in the lab by yourself. Like, let's not throw things out on that premise, you
Yeah.
know? So, and even if there's not industry literature, like, let's lean into well data. Let's present these things as questions. Like, we have a concern. Could you explain this?
Yeah.
But right now we're stuck sort of butting heads with, a third party lab. And our customers are upset. Not necessarily with us, thankfully. But trust is something that's easy to lose, and we work really hard to get it. And when these kinds of things come around and perhaps undermine the trust our customers have in us, um, it, it's very frustrating because if they don't trust you anymore, it's really hard to get back. So if you're not going to trust me, it's because I did something wrong,
Right.
right? Like that.
And kind of coming at it from the account manager's perspective, because I spent many years in that role. You work extremely. Everyone works hard to service a customer, and being that the account managers are typically in the sort of the front line dealing with customers day in and day out, and you get them on their best days, you get them on their worst days, and everything in between. Man, it's tough because you've got, like you said, everyone in the field operations, going into the account manager. And at the end of the day, the account manager, with the support from you and your team, has to be the one to answer. And they've got enough things on their plate where stuff like this just creates a distraction from the overall goal, right? And it is, day in and day out, we're problem solvers, we're and helping support the customer. But when this stuff comes along, man, it can really throw you off track, and it could take weeks, days, months to kind of like get back in a position with your customer that it's business as usual because of all the distraction that may have been caused. So it goes far beyond a third party lab trying to be, oh, here's this report and fix your mud and all your problems will go away. I don't think folks, unless they've maybe worked in the mud business, quite understand how far down the line this stuff can go and how many people get involved, and you know things just they can get out of hand real fast. And unfortunately, I don't think people realize the impact that something like that can cause.
Yeah. I mean, and at the end of the day, look, I mean, we're trying to, it's a competitive industry. I understand all those things, but like, no, like we could make this better for everybody. We could be singing their praises and saying these are the guys you can trust. But that's not what happened. But the other part of it is, like, you and I are very fortunate because we work in the office and we sort of have our book of business, whether that's supporting accounts, or in your case, like you have specific customers that you call on and that sort of thing. Um, but like an individual mud engineer, if they're displaced from a rig, there's not a lot of places for them to go right now.
Yeah.
And if it were to happen because of something like this, I mean, like, it's tough out there, guy. Like, right? Like, the rig count is still not recovering. And right now we're holding on to some great people.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
and I want to make sure that people who are working their tails off, on our behalf, where we get to, enjoy our office jobs because of the hard work they do, that keeps us with those customers. Like, I don't want it to be because of something like this that they're sitting at home.
Yeah. No, that's a great way to close out. And with that said, again, any thoughts, feedback, questions, would love to help answer them, elaborate on anything that was discussed today. I just say, Matt, if you have any closing last words, but I really like the way you ended on that one. And again, to all the field folks out there working tirelessly to keep mud in line and do the best job you can for the customer and for the company folks that are out there, and obviously supporting the account managers and everyone else in the office here. It's major props to everyone out there. And with that said, from an education piece, this is mainly why we do the podcast, is to educate, inform, and obviously have good discussions around different topics. But you can also find Matt and I on LinkedIn. Connect with the AES Fluids page on LinkedIn. Check out the website. It continuously is getting updated with whether it be new products and just some of the stuff that we continue to roll out. Obviously on YouTube too, many good tech tips and more educational content out on that. With that being said, folks, take care for now. Until next time, be safe. Cheers.
Take care.
Thanks for listening. Please tune in next week for another exciting episode of the Flowline. And remember, may your returns always be full and your trips always smooth. Views expressed in this program belong to participants and not their employees. The program is for informational purposes only and cannot take the place of seeking professional advice. Copyright AES Drilling Fluids.